Hello, Noshene. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Will. I am delighted and honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's so wonderful to have you. And I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now. And it's very tender. It's very tender. And our focus today is on what's happening in Iran and with the women of Iran. And I wonder, there may be people listening who don't know what's going on. So I wonder if we could start with maybe a little bit of an overview of what's been going on in the past couple of months over there. And maybe even if you want to give a bigger context, that would be great too.
Absolutely. So, greetings to everyone who's watching and listening, and for hearing what I have to say as an Iranian American woman living in America for the past, 33 years. So, as most of you probably already know, the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is the current government, has been in power since 1979, so about 43 years. I know that really well because I was 2 when 1979 happened. And it's more or less been a dictatorship under the guise of religion, but really not honoring any religious or spiritual values. So it has been extremely oppressive to women, to children, to people of other religious beliefs, to gender and sexuality minorities, to much influence or connection to the outside world. So in many ways, the society has been forced to be closed and to be to continue to get poorer and more divided and more hopeless and more devoid or disconnected from the richness of culture and land and all the beauty that is Persia has been for thousands of years. So, so oppression and human rights violations have not been a new thing. However, a couple months ago, it just so happened, this is where I almost get goosebumps even thinking about how phases and processes of life and world have a life of their own. So a couple of months ago, this young 22-year-old woman, Mahsa Amini, she was from an indigenous tribal community, Kurdistan, Sanandaj, Sakbiz is the name of the very small town that she and her beautiful family lived in. And she won a trip to the big city of Tehran with her big brother. And so they decided to take a trip and see the world, the city world. And they got there and somehow the two of them were apprehended by the morality police. There's this morality police that in my mind is like the immorality police, like they don't do anything moral as a police force. But anyway, they're called a morality police and they apprehend people whose hair is showing if they're a woman or if they're dressed inappropriately according to the regime's guidelines. And so even about very small things like somebody wearing makeup or nail polish, like that could set off for no reason for them to apprehend you and, say some really awful, negative, disparaging remarks and make you fix it or take you into custody if you don't do what they ask you to do immediately. So she and her brother got apprehended and they took her in by force. And then the next thing we knew was her brother, of course, worried as to where she's going. And then for a period of time, nobody knew where she was. And then she ended up in the hospital bed. Somebody happened to take a photo of her and share it with the world. And she died while in custody in the intensive care unit after having been hit and her brain getting damaged, the traumatic brain injury, multiple hits to the head, losing consciousness, going into a coma, and then dying. So this event and her hijab or covering was actually much better than a lot of other people walking around, because over the past 43 years, everyone has tried to find ways to live a little, so whether it means showing a little bit of hair or having a little bit of makeup or, trying to have a, God forbid, boyfriend or girlfriend or, significant other on the street to hold hands with. So, but hers was actually relatively conservative. She just had a little bit of hair showing under her scarf. And so when this happened to this innocent indigenous Kurdish girl, and it happened in such a short period of time, and there was somebody who took a picture and told the story, that all of a sudden there was this appropriate backlash of anger and frustration and rage from everyone, not just her family, but the entire city that she was from, and then other cities and other people. So it's almost like, I like to use the analogy of a balloon. It's like it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then there's one little needle that makes it burst. And it's as if the entire fabric of Iran and those outside more and more have the innocence, the authenticity of this young woman's story and murder and what happened to her has made everyone just about wake up and say, this is not okay. Mm-hmm. And so this has led to protests and people coming on the streets and seeking justice, not just for her, but because there is a connection and relatability to Mahsa and Mahsa's story, as if each one of us wants to live a little, breathe a little, be able to take a trip, be able to be treated as any human, any child, any mother, any father would like their kids to be. And it has created a revolution. And at first it was mostly women who were like, we're all Mahsa, we all stand up with her. And then it was all the young men rising up and saying, she's just like our sister. She's just like, our significant other. She's just like our mother, so it's just this beautiful movement of speaking up for something so simple. And then there's been backlash from the government. So the protests and what is now being referred to as the new Iranian Revolution is being met with more deaths, more murders.
Several hundred at this point, from what I've heard.
Including children.
Yeah.
So then the children in the schools started coming out and saying, we want human rights. We don't want to live in a dictatorship. We want to have a future. And the world is watching and saying, like, what happened? Where were they for the past 43 years?
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes one more atrocity when the story is shared, when the relatability, when the humanity of it is so just the right time and just the right moment and just the right story. And it can touch all of us. I can definitely say for myself, my life will never be the same again because of Mahsa.
Mm. Thank you for the eloquent summary of a massive amount of history and present. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit of what it's like for you as a physician and as a trauma, maybe fair to say, maybe not trauma specialist, but maybe that is the right term for you. I mean, I think we all are who are working with anything in mental health, right? What's it like to see people in your country of origin in this fight for decency? Really, is what it sounds like to me on a fundamental level of human freedom to experience a decent life.
Well, I didn't specialize in trauma for any reason other than the fact that I'm a survivor myself. And there's something so beautiful and powerful about trauma. It is an opportunity for rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
And so the hope for transformation is the reason as many of us have survived and have made it to the other side. And so as a psychiatrist, as a Iranian American woman living outside of Iran for the past 33 years, it is awe-inspiring. It is humbling because perhaps it's something I had secretly hoped and prayed for to come to pass at some point before it's my time to leave this world. And what I mean is for the truth to be revealed, for the voices to be heard, for the healing to have the opportunity to begin. Because when trauma is hidden from sight, when the stories aren't told, when people are not empowered enough to share their voice, there is no end to what trauma can do to destroy a body, a mind, a soul, a community, a family, a population, a culture, a village, a world, a planet. And to witness the unveiling of trauma means that there is hope, that it's like the top of the curve is like that needs to happen. And then the rest is sharing more, connecting, finding resources, bringing the world together to meet the needs, just like we've seen, whether it's Ukraine or Gaza or 9/11 or, name the trauma of the day. But when that happens, that's when I feel exhilarated that there's a hope for all of us. Mm-hmm. And it's, so not to say, when it first started, I felt all emotions. I felt anger, rage, grief, tears rolling, fear for my family, for my friends, for people I'm helping train in Iran, for my own future possibility of ever being able to return. So all of those feelings were there. And then little by little, as the voices got out, as the stories got out, as support from England to Germany to Toronto to LA to New York, started to come out, then there was this awe of almost watching a baby be born, maybe we all are witnessing something so precious, so historical, that it's not just for Iranians, that it's one example of what can happen when we all come together to hear voices that have been silenced for a long time.
Wow. So there's a galvanizing in recognizing the shared humanity and the shared value of having a life where you can hope for, or you can see the possibility for your fullest expression, rather than living underneath the weight of oppression and human rights violations and the whole 9 yards of that I think anyone can relate to.
Yeah, and it's for me, the other part that is like, I can't even get my mind around it, but most of my work in trauma over the past 13, 14 years has been with Native American and Indigenous communities in the US. So I hadn't really been very much in touch at all with my Iranian people, heritage. I couldn't even speak the language very well up until a few months ago. And what the similarity, speaking of how this is not just for one people or one place, is I see something very similar to what I've been learning from the Native and the Indigenous people, is that they are a powerhouse of culture, of richness, of wisdom, of ceremony, of ritual, of music, of community, of grounded strength as thousands of tribes, most unrecognized. A lot of them have not had the chance to survive the genocides. So we have a few left. And their strength and their culture, their wisdom has the capacity to help so many people. If and when they can find their voice, they can fully heal and embody the heritage, the beauty that they have, then everyone will benefit. And as long as they're silenced or not attended to and continue to suffer from the diseases and the conditions that have been trauma induced, then we all lose out,
Right.
And they have taught me so much about healing and about connecting to my own roots. I remember meeting with the very first Native people in the US, and they said, tell us more about where you come from, connect with your own culture, speak your own language, and that's how they taught me to learn about trauma. Because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to support this population with their trauma. Let me take a look at my own, because I've got plenty of it in my ancestry. And that's the same thing I see in a place like Iran, is that there is this depth of poetry and culture and music and rugs and language that has basically been hidden from all of humanity, more or less. Many pictures we see are of all the bad stuff that's happened in the Middle East. And yet that beauty has the capacity to enliven, enrich, interconnect, many people on this planet, if and when it is allowed to come out the other side. It's a win for all, potentially, or a lose for all, the other side.
Tell us a little more about your trainings in Iran. And are you speaking about the Center for Mind Body Medicine and trainings that way? Or I'd love to hear more about what you're up to there.
Sure. Yes. So my work in Iran is currently through the Center for Mind Body Medicine, 501(c) in Washington, D.C., based out of there. And initially founded by Dr. James Gordon some 30 years ago. And CMBM for short, have been doing global trauma relief population-wide programs all along in Kosovo and Gaza and Haiti and South Sudan and Syria and Jordan, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan and Turkmenistan, you name it. And they do that well because it's not easy work, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But the blessing is that COVID allowed for all the programming, which used to be in person, go to a community, train 50, 100, 200 people, and then supervise them by phone from afar until they get to a place where they can hold circles and workshops and kind of be empowered to take care of their own community using these techniques and skills, was all turned virtual, as with everything else. And for the first time, they were able to have a more global training where people from any country could come as long as the time zone was not too limiting for, where they were living. So in 2021, we had our first global training with, a couple of hundred people from all over the world, Ireland, India, China, Iran, South Sudan, Mozambique, etc. Portugal. It was a beautiful mix. I've never seen that level of diversity in one of the Center for Mind Body Medicine trainings. And so 40 Iranians were able to show up because we had a grant funding, and they were medical students and nurses and therapists and social workers and school teachers. And I didn't know them before, but they showed up out of the woodwork as these grassroots efforts happen. Different people invited different folks who they knew might be interested in beginning this training process. And it's a pretty intensive and involved process because working with trauma does require skill building and supervision and mentorship and a lot of support, care for the caregivers. So that has evolved over time. And then, of course, the Mahsa revolution starts. And here we are with, 60 to 80 people in Iran who are going through these trainings, are actively delivering groups and workshops to women, to young people, to older people. Wow. And so now we get to scale it because, another one of those things where you couldn't have planned this. Like, this is really the work of spirit where, one thing leads to another, and then you just happen to be in the right time in the right place when a need arises. And there's nothing in the world I'd rather be doing than supporting my fellow country people to support each other. And maybe I will get to go visit them someday and celebrate with
I hope so.
Tons of others.
May it be so. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. The weird blessings of pandemics and other tragedies, right? That paved the way for these folks, these beautiful souls, to be ready to enter the situation and spread the practices. It sounds like you're teaching skills. Is that how it works for the most part?
Yeah. So, the science and the essence of mind-body medicine is that trauma has the potential to disintegrate our mind, body, emotion, behavior, connection. And so in order to heal that trauma, we need to bring ourselves back together into a whole being through that process of support, training, skills, time, connection. And it can take many different forms, whether it's, various therapies and that are present within integrative psychiatry for treating trauma individually. But then there are also group and more community-based efforts that meet the needs of larger scopes because you're never going to have enough therapists and psychiatrists to meet the needs of millions of people in such a short time. And so it's an empowerment model where in a circle, people get to experience, learn the science basic of various skills, whether it's a variety of type of meditations, to use of arts, drawings, writing, expressive sharing of their life and their stories, as well as things like autogenics and biofeedback and the use of simple rituals and ceremonies and dance and movement. And imagery is mindful eating imagery. So there's about 10 or 15 techniques that people learn first to practice for themselves within a safe space of a circle of 10 people. But then they can learn professionally how to facilitate these circles for their school, for their community clinic, for their community center, for kids, for adults. So that's kind of the model that can be then scaled up like a ripple effect.
Beautiful. Wow.
And the beauty of it is that anyone can learn it. So you don't have to be a doctor or have an advanced degree. A teacher, a community activist, a rabbi, priest, whoever can learn the materials, a mother, whatever can learn. Older students can learn it and teach the younger ones. So it's a community-based intervention, not a biomedical intervention.
Beautiful. And is there, within this oppressive regime, are there problems with access to video conferencing, or can you actually use Zoom to spread the word within the country? Or,
so this is also one of those things where it makes you so sad and angry, and then it also makes you laugh, because I have to tell you. So they're shutting down the internet. The government of Iran is shutting down internet on a regular basis to keep people from organizing and from helping each other, because, there's power in communication and sharing and telling the story.
Right.
And this oppressive regime is not going to survive if people are together. So there's that going on. And then you have a young, brilliant generation of Iranian kids who are smarter than the government. So one
know
day
how to get around.
not working, and we go to Google Meet, and one day Google Meet's not working, and we go to emo. And I mean, I have learned so many apps and texts and things, not very well, but thank goodness for the capacity of the young minds to try to get around. So they're doing just fine, but they could use additional support for sure.
Wow.
It's very humbling.
So obviously, or maybe not so obviously, at least what I was taught in my trauma training with Peter Levine and his folks at Somatic Experiencing was a kind of a pretty strong opinion about what can happen while people are still under threat, and what kind of work is the right kind of work for people who are still, whether they're in a war zone or they're in a under a violent oppressive regime, or what the situation is, that the sort of philosophy that one needs to be off the battlefield before the deeper, more vulnerable elements of trauma resolution can occur. But it occurs to me that what you're talking about, this really deep community resource and listening and giving space for people to break the silence and also be with others, to me feels like a form of healing that's much bigger than just what we sometimes think about in trauma resolution as, well, that's just resourcing. That's just the beginning of the healing journey. So I'm curious how you think about these things.
Yeah, it's definitely not a fix-it solution. It is the foundations of a healing journey that for most of us takes a lifetime. So the safe space within which to begin to build trust and connect and have certain guidelines and boundaries as to when is it my turn to share? I get to decide how much to share. I get to choose which technique speaks to me and do more of that and save another one, learn about it, but save it for tomorrow when I'm like, oh, now I feel like doing a drawing. But yesterday I just did not feel like picking up the crayons or music or movement. So it is giving, providing educational healing tools that are already within all of us, within a safe space, and then allowing people over time to practice in their own terms, in their own way, to continue to build and connect. But I would say that the group support is probably the foundation, and then all the techniques and the ongoing nature of the need to heal are going to be continuous. But once there has been at least one space created where some walls begin to come down and some degree of connection with the tears, the laughter, the hearing stories, the sharing stories is allowed to take place, then that can become an example of more spaces to be created in one's family and one's community for ongoing support and healing, in addition to all the other resources and therapies and medications and supplements that might help in the process.
Mm-hmm. What that makes sense, and it's to me makes all kinds of sense. I mean, practically, of course, but also just from you brought up integrative psychiatry. I think, oftentimes we start at the top and go down, with the fancy and the technological and the expensive and the this and the that, when things that, as you pointed out, talking about Native American ritual, there are these technologies that have evolved with us over millennia that are very effective in many instances, and really don't require even necessarily a Western framework or a Western mind to figure it out. We're in some ways with Western medicine, we're late to the game in understanding even what illness is. And with all respect to Western medicine and the technological advances, which, obviously save lives in certain situations. But I think, especially in mental health, we have, in my opinion, really overcomplicated many of the things that we try to accomplish. And we forget about the roots of culture and connection and community relationships that, without which the healing is so much more difficult and complicated. I'm wondering, go ahead.
I see it as a marriage, a potential for marriage between the left and the right side of the brain, the science and the arts, the indigenous and the modern, because we need it. There's no way we're going to survive with one and not the other in this world. And it's an opportunity to honor what has been true and tried for thousands of years, like breath practice and body practice and music and arts, and the science of neuroplasticity and the science of mind-body medicine and biofeedback and how to tune into your gut and to your intuition. Like, there's research behind these gut-brain connections now. So it's an opportunity to bring us together, back to wholeness, not just for the individual, but for our cultures, our humanity, our planet.
what would you say to people who want to help, who are listening and don't know where to start, as far as people outside of Iran who really care and don't want to, turn a blind eye, and also don't want to offer support that's not supportive? What do you recommend?
Thank you for asking. I think there are so many layers of what is needed. So I can mention a few, and I think it's important to acknowledge that none of us can do it all. So, see what fits with where each person is at, and then see what else is possible. At the core of it is to continue our own deep inner healing work, each of us, because this is not just the problem of Iranians. This is a inner revolution for humans seeking wholeness. And so it's needed in every part of America or London or whatever, as it's in Iran, or, Ukraine now and elsewhere. So I think that is without question, the one thing we can all do is do our own inner work. Mm. And then, as far as advocacy is concerned, there are opportunities to share people's stories, be people's voices. I'm working on a storytelling campaign of several women in Iran who one by one will be telling their story, and will be publishing these. I started with mine as a practice a couple of days ago. So share people's stories, because stories alert people and they heal people and they bring us together. So consider signing a petition. So there's way too many petitions, because the human rights violations are so extreme that there need to be voices to UNICEF and to the UN and to representatives and organizations across the world to pay attention and do what they can to address what's happening. And then there is monetary donation needs for a variety of efforts, whether it's providing materials for internet connection to people who don't have it. If there's ever the Starlink possibility, they'll need satellite structures to actually bring the resources to Iran. So there will be opportunities for that. There are going to be efforts for people who are striking against the government. So like the oil refineries and the government workers who are willing to go on strike, eventually they'll need some support to be able to continue the strike. Otherwise, they'll be forced to go back to work.
Right.
Put their families at risk. So those will be some of the things that will be coming up over the next couple of months as opportunities. And then, of course, we have the Iran Trauma Healing Program through the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, which would allow for the continued training of hopefully up to 500 or 1,000 Iranians across the Iran, as well as Iranians who live outside of Iran, so they can begin to really network together and support each other through these trauma workshops and groups. So that's another need. And I'm sure there's more that I'm not thinking of, but more than anything, continue doing our own work, because it takes a level of awareness and connection of consciousness for these types of revolutions to take a positive point towards something better for all of us. And that really requires daily inner work, meditation, connecting with our intuition, ourselves as well.
Mm. It's very beautiful. Thank you for putting forward the doing our own work piece. It really deeply resonates with perspective that I've learned about in traditional indigenous frameworks that some Native American, some South American, some North American, some South American, and this sense that we're all holding this collective shadow and trauma and violence and dehumanization. It's in all of us, as Thich Nhat Hanh said so well in his poem about being the rapist and the murderer and the everything. And I think it's so important what you're saying, because there's this kind of, I think, reflexive tendency that we have of thinking like, oh, that's not me. Like, I feel pity for the women in Iran, and I'm not having that experience over here. And it creates more of the same, I think, of this kind of us and them, and this loss of connectivity between human beings and within what we're already holding together as a species, as a group. And it seems like to me that whenever we do our own work and we release or we integrate something very deep in us, then we're letting a little bit of air out of the balloon for the rest of us, and that can't not help, to do our own. It's like clean up your own room, right? Before you go help someone or along with going and helping others, but not forgetting that there is that work for us to do.
It takes a village, many villages.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm wondering probably very hard to answer this question, and maybe not the best question, but where do you think, if we're optimistic about where this is headed in Iran, where do you think this can go or might go?
Oh, great question. My hope is for continuation of what's happening, the whole world coming together around the Iranian people, for truth and light to way overcome the darkness and the alternative facts and the fake news that is trying to confuse people. And eventually there will be that tipping point of there being nowhere to go but towards freedom and towards a new democracy that will help everyone, except for those who have been hurting people, and hopefully they'll find their way. And so whether that's a few months from now or a few years from now, I hope it's sooner, because the human toll, the trauma toll, the death toll, the children's life toll is at risk. And so I think the more supports, the more energies are brought together sooner rather than later, the chances that the toll will be more manageable when it's time to rebuild is higher. But I hear tremendous hope from the people and from many outside of Iran. So if there's ever going to be a time for there to be lifting of the veils of dictatorship, this is it.
Well, thank you, Noshene, for standing in the middle of the place that you occupy and feeling what you're feeling and running what you're running through your system and transmitting to us what you know and what is happening. It's a blessing to get to make contact with you here.
It's an absolute privilege and honor, and And I wish us all continued empowerment and healing and our voices being heard and hearing each other's voices. Thank you.
Thank you.